There are moments in a woman's life when she walks through a valley so quiet, so dark, it feels like even heaven has fallen silent. After heartbreak, her world does not collapse with noise, it unravels in whispers. A love that once made her feel seen, heard, and chosen now leaves behind an echo of questions. Why did it end? Was she not enough? Could she have done more? These thoughts do not shout, they haunt. And if you've never known the depth of a woman's heartbreak, let me tell you, it's not simply about missing someone. It's about losing the version of herself she gave away in the process of loving someone who didn't stay. She may sit in a crowded room with laughter all around, yet her mind is still replaying the last goodbye. The world tells her to move on, but her heart begs for answers. This is the silent war that rages inside her between the memory of what was and the acceptance of what is. Her thoughts drift back to the beginning, the texts that made her smile, the promises whispered into the night, the dreams built brick by brick. And now, every memory becomes a thread unraveling the fabric of her peace. But this is where something sacred happens. In that place of pain, when she feels like she has nothing left, God begins His quiet work. Her mind may still carry the burden of betrayal, confusion, or rejection, but her spirit begins to stir. Heartbreak, though cruel, is never wasted. It becomes a holy fire, burning away illusions and revealing truths she couldn't see when love blinded her. The pain becomes a mirror, showing her not what she lost, but what she gave. And in that mirror, she starts to see that maybe, just maybe, she deserves more than someone who couldn't choose her. Her healing does not come all at once. It arrives slowly like sunrise through a stormy sky. One day she wakes up and doesn't check her phone. One day she hears his name and doesn't feel her stomach turn. One day she walks past the places they once shared and realizes her steps are steady. This is how a woman's mind recovers, not through forgetting, but through transforming the meaning of what happened. She doesn't erase the past, she reframes it. And that becomes her power. She begins to pray differently. At first, she prays for him to come back. Then she prays to understand why he left. And then something shifts. She prays not for answers, but for peace. She no longer begs for the past to return. She thanks God for protecting her from what wasn't meant for her. Her heartbreak becomes her teacher. Her solitude becomes sacred. Her silence becomes strength. And while the world sees a woman alone, heaven sees a woman being rebuilt. In time, forgiveness blooms, not for the sake of the one who broke her, but for the freedom it brings to her own soul. She lets go, not because she doesn't care, but because she cares enough about herself to no longer carry what she cannot change. Her mind, once a prison of regret, becomes a garden of wisdom. She stops chasing closure and starts writing her own new chapter. She stops seeking someone else to make her feel worthy and starts remembering who she was before anyone ever broke her. And now, as she rises from the ashes, there is something unshakable in her. She is not hardened, but she is no longer naive. She still believes in love, but now she knows that real love will never require her to lose herself again. She has learned that pain is not the end of her story, it is the part that awakens her to the strength she always had. Her heartbreak didn't destroy her, it revealed her. And now she walks, not with a broken spirit, but with a soul that has been refined by fire. So to every woman watching this, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, yes, you will. Not because he returns, not because time erases the memories, but because the same God who saw your tears in the night is now preparing your breakthrough. This is not the end. This is your becoming. You are not broken. You are being rebuilt stronger, wiser, and with a love for yourself that no heartbreak can ever steal again. There is a kind of silence that falls after love walks away. And it isn't just quiet, it's deafening. It's the kind of silence that a woman feels in her chest long after the door has closed. when the final message has been read, when there's nothing left to say but everything still left to feel. This silence is not peaceful. It's heavy. It presses down on her like the weight of unanswered questions, like the echo of words she wishes she had said and the ones she wishes she hadn't. When love fades, when the warmth turns cold, her soul doesn't just hurt, it trembles. She doesn't scream, she doesn't beg, because the pain has taken even her voice. There is a sacred kind of grief that takes place in this silence, one no one else can hear. Her smile might still stretch across her face, but inside there is an emptiness so loud, so consuming, that it becomes a part of her. In that silence, memories come uninvited. The laughter, the late-night talks, the way her name sounded when he said it with love, it all comes back like ghosts, not to haunt her, but to test her. Her mind becomes a theater of memories, scenes replaying over and over, asking where did it all go wrong? Was it her? Did she expect too much? Did she love too freely? She replays his words, not just once, but 100 times, looking for clues, searching for the moment his heart changed. But heartbreak is rarely loud or dramatic. Sometimes it dies in silence, in distance, in slow neglect. That's what makes it so hard. Because there's no big fight to point to. No explosion. Just the slow fading of color, the gradual dimming of light, the sound of silence growing louder. She may try to distract herself, keep busy, act strong. But the silence follows her. It sits with her in traffic. It lays beside her in bed. It walks with her into the grocery store. It becomes a shadow. And the world doesn't always understand. Friends say move on, as if grief follows a schedule, as if silence can be rushed away. But a woman knows that healing isn't loud. It isn't fast. It is still. It is quiet. It is slow. And it starts in the silence where she faces herself. Not the version of her that was loved, but the version left behind. Yet in this silence, something else begins to whisper. It's faint at first, almost too quiet to hear, but it's there. A small voice reminding her she's still breathing, still standing, still capable of being whole. The same silence that once broke her begins to cradle her. It becomes the place where she listens for something greater than her pain. The noise of the world is gone. The opinions of others fade. And what remains is a woman and the sound of her own soul trying to rise again. After heartbreak, a woman enters a battlefield that no one sees, a war that rages within her own mind. It's not fought with swords or fury, but with memories that come uninvited and healing that feels far away. Her heart longs to move forward, but her mind is still trapped in moments that no longer exist. She walks through her days with a brave face, but in the quiet, when no one is watching, her thoughts pull her backward into the past. She remembers the sound of his laughter, the way his hand fit perfectly into hers, the warmth in his eyes when hen's eyes. He looked at her like she was the only one in the world. These memories come in waves, not to comfort her, but to challenge the strength she's trying to rebuild. Every small reminder, a song, a scent, a time of day, becomes a trigger. It's not just about missing him. It's about missing who. She was when she was with him, missing the safety she thought she had, and the future she thought was certain. This is the war that no one else sees. Memory versus healing. Her heart says, let go, but her mind says, remember. She is caught in between what she knows and what she feels. She knows it ended for a reason. She knows she deserves more than someone who couldn't stay. But she still wonders if it was her fault. If maybe she should have been quieter, stronger, less emotional, more patient. She starts bargaining with herself and her thoughts, trying to rewrite the past even though she knows she can't change it. And the more she replays it, the harder it becomes to breathe. But within this inner battle, something else begins to grow. Healing is not loud or sudden. It's not a moment, it's a process. and slowly, the volume of the memories begins to fade. They don't vanish, but they lose their power to paralyze. She starts to remember the moments when she felt ignored, when she cried herself to sleep, when she was begging for attention she should never have had to earn. Healing speaks in whispers at first. It tells her, you didn't lose love, you lost something that wasn't built to last. It tells her that love shouldn't hurt this much, that real love brings peace, not confusion. The more she listens, the more she begins to choose herself over the past. And that is the quiet turning point. She realizes that healing isn't about forgetting him, it's about remembering herself. It's about taking back the pieces of her heart that she gave away without knowing if they'd be protected. And while her mind still wanders into the past, she now has the strength to bring it back to the present. The war between memory and healing doesn't end in a moment of victory. It ends when she no longer allows the past to write her future. When she understands that her pain is real, but so is her power to rise beyond it. That's when the war begins to lose its grip. There comes a moment after heartbreak when everything feels like it's falling apart. And that moment is not as loud as people think. It's quiet, almost still, like the calm just before something sacred begins. A woman sits in the wreckage of what used to be her dreams, her plans, her love, and for a while, it seems like the end. She stares at herself in the mirror and doesn't recognize the face looking back. The light in her eyes has dimmed. The smile she wore so naturally now feels foreign. It is in this space where her chest aches and her hands tremble and her soul feels stripped bare that something hidden begins to awaken. The world sees a woman broken, but heaven sees a woman being prepared. Because when a woman reaches her breaking point, it may appear like defeat, but spiritually, it is often the starting point of her greatest awakening. This is the sacred paradox of heartbreak. It crushes her and calls her higher at the same time. In the pain, she meets a version of herself she never knew existed. The strength that she thought she needed someone else to give her, she starts finding in herself. She begins to realize that survival isn't just about getting through the day, it's about deciding not to let her pain define her. And though she may cry on the floor at night, though she may whisper prayers that sound more like pleading than praise, she keeps showing up. That's the strength the world often overlooks, the strength to keep breathing when your heart feels like it's collapsing, the strength to keep trusting when everything around you feels like betrayal. Her breaking point doesn't mark the end of her power, it reveals its source. When she loses what she thought she couldn't live without, she begins to discover who she truly is without it. The layers begin to peel back. The masks fall off. And beneath the woman who loved deeply and lost painfully, emerges the woman who stands not because someone held her up, but because she dug her heels into grace and rose on her own. The very moment she thought would destroy her becomes the ground where resilience begins to grow. Her faith, once quiet and uncertain, starts to whisper again, "You were made for more." And that whisper grows louder each time she chooses not to text back. Each time she walks away from memories trying to pull her under. Each time she decides that her worth isn't up for negotiation. Her strength isn't in pretending she's okay. It's in admitting that she's not and still pressing forward. The world teaches us to fear the breaking point, but she learns to respect it, because that was the moment everything false fell away and only the truth remained. The truth that she is more than who left her. The truth that what ended wasn't her identity. The truth that from this pain, she's rising, not just back to who she was, but into someone even stronger, even softer, and far more whole than she ever knew she could be. When a woman's heart is shattered and the world continues to move around her as if nothing has happened, she enters a silence that the people around her cannot hear. But in that stillness, beneath the sorrow, beneath the confusion, something deeply spiritual begins to stir. At first, the silence is unbearable. It's loud with memories and flooded with thoughts that she can't seem to escape. She hears his voice in the quiet. She feels the absence of the connection she once depended on. Her soul aches not just for the man she lost, but for the certainty that came with being loved, for the way she used to feel when her heart had a home. This silence doesn't bring peace. Not at first, it brings restlessness. But here's where the shift begins. In the silence, where all distractions are stripped away, her spirit finally gets room to speak. And at first, it trembles. It doesn't roar. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It asks questions like, who am I when no one's loving me? And what does my worth look like when no one is validating it? These are not questions she would have asked in comfort. They rise only when comfort is gone. But these are the questions that change her life. In the absence of affection, she begins to search for identity. In the absence of a voice saying, "You're beautiful," she begins to ask, "Do I believe that on my own?" Her tears no longer just come from grief, they become part of a cleansing. And the prayers she once said for him to return start changing too. They shift from "bring him back" to "bring me back to myself." That's when heaven leans in. That's when something unseen begins to surround her. Grace enters quietly, like a friend sitting next to her pain, not rushing her, not trying to fix her, just being there until she can breathe again. Her relationship with God deepens, not because everything is perfect, but because she finally has no choice but to depend on something greater than herself. Her faith grows not in the mountaintop moments, but right there in the valley when she's asking why it all fell apart. She starts to understand that this heartbreak didn't happen to destroy her, it happened to wake her. It called her to rise. It called her to let go of what she thought she needed so she could become who she was meant to be. And in that silence, something powerful happens. She begins to feel seen by God in a way she never did when she was distracted by being seen by a man. She begins to feel loved by something eternal, something that cannot walk away, something that doesn't change its mind. That shift, the move from needing someone else to feel whole, to learning she was never broken to begin with, is what transforms her. It's not immediate, it's not dramatic, but it's real. It's the kind of healing that builds a foundation she can stand on forever. There comes a day, often unexpected and quiet, when the weight of heartbreak begins to shift, not because the pain is gone, but because the woman carrying it starts to remember who she is. It doesn't happen with a dramatic moment. There's no spotlight, no applause, no visible sign to the world. But something internal clicks. She wakes up one morning and doesn't reach for her phone to see if he messaged. She walks past a place they once shared and doesn't feel her chest tighten. She hears his name and instead of breaking, she breathes. This is the moment when she begins to reclaim her power. Not because she stopped loving, but because she started choosing herself. It isn't anger that drives this shift, it's clarity. She no longer looks at him as her rescue or her ruin. She sees him as a chapter in her story, not the whole book. She no longer begs God to bring him back. Instead, she starts asking for the wisdom to never return to a version of herself that settled for less than what she's worth. The same tears that once felt like weakness begin to feel like a cleansing. Her voice, once quieted by fear of loss, begins to rise with boldness. She speaks not to be heard by him, but to be heard by herself. She sets boundaries, not as walls to keep love out, but as doors to protect the peace she fought so hard to rebuild. And as she starts to heal, she sees the red flags she once ignored. She sees how deeply she gave and how little was returned. But instead of regret, she feels gratitude for the lessons, for the strength, for the resilience that was born in the fire. She reclaims her power in small decisions. The text she doesn't send, the memory she no longer entertains, the night she sleeps without crying. She no longer searches his social media for signs or waits for closure that may never come. She understands that closure isn't something someone gives you, it's something you give yourself. And the most powerful closure is not in hearing, "I'm sorry," but in saying, "I deserve better," and meaning it with every fiber of your being. Her power doesn't make her hard, it makes her wise. It softens her toward herself. She gives herself grace for what she didn't know then. She no longer shames herself for staying too long or loving too deeply, because she now knows that her capacity to love is not her weakness, it's her gift. And moving forward doesn't mean she stops loving altogether. It means she starts loving smarter, safer, and most importantly, she starts loving herself with the same depth she once poured into someone else. That is where her power returns, not in revenge, not in rebounds, but in rising with dignity, in walking forward without bitterness, in understanding that healing is not about pretending it never hurt, but about choosing not to be defined by what tried to break her in the stillness that follows the storm of heartbreak. There comes a sacred moment when a woman begins to feel something shift, not around her, but within her. It is subtle at first. There is no loud announcement, no grand event, but something begins to return. Her heart, once stretched, scattered, and aching from loving someone who couldn't hold it, starts to feel like her own again. It no longer beats with the weight of waiting, the ache of wondering, or the silent hope of reconciliation. Instead, it starts to beat with calm, with steadiness, with strength. Her heart, once given so freely, often without the safety of being held gently, now finds sanctuary within herself. She begins to trust her own intuition, not the promises of someone else. She begins to choose peace over pursuit. She stops chasing closure from someone who left her with questions and starts writing her own answers. She stops rehearsing the past, not because she forgets it, but because she no longer feels imprisoned by it. What once replayed endlessly in her mind, the texts, the tone of his voice, the pain in his silence, loses its grip. The silence no longer mocks her. Now it comforts her. Her heart, which had been given away in pieces, now comes back together piece by piece. Not by forgetting, but by forgiving, not for his sake, but for hers. Not because he earned it, but because she deserves to be free. And in this freedom, something beautiful begins to happen. She smiles again, not the smile that covers pain, but the kind that rises from deep within. She laughs without guilt. She dreams without limitation. She begins to imagine a future without tying it to someone else's presence. She no longer sees her worth through the lens of who chose her or who walked away. She defines it from within. Her heart becomes hers, not to close off in fear, but to protect with wisdom. She becomes more discerning, not colder, more patient, not distant. She sees love differently, not as something to prove, but something to receive with joy and give from overflow. And when she looks back at the version of herself who loved without boundaries, who broke silently, who cried alone at night hoping he would return, she doesn't feel ashamed. She feels compassion, because that version of her was doing the best she could with the love she had. That version of her didn't fail. She simply outgrew the space she had once fit inside. And now, as her heart becomes her own, she walks differently. She walks with grace, not just for others but for herself. She carries a quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself, a softness that has survived the fire, a beauty that no longer needs validation to shine. This is the woman who rises after heartbreak, not untouched by pain, but transformed through it. A woman who knows that love may break your heart, but healing will make it yours again, stronger and more sacred than ever before. And so, as we draw near the end of this journey into the soul of a woman after heartbreak, we don't simply see pain, we witness the birth of purpose. We have walked through her confusion, her grief, her silence, her struggle to let go, and her brave decision to reclaim what was always hers, her voice, her worth, her heart. We have seen that heartbreak is not the end of her story, but the refining fire that draws her closer to her true self. It reveals the sacred truth that what was broken was never her spirit, but the illusion that she needed someone else to complete her. Her mind may have wandered through shadows, through doubt, through endless what-ifs, but in the end, it finds its rest in truth. She is no longer the woman who waits for closure or chases validation. She is the woman who walks forward, eyes lifted, heart guarded by wisdom, hands open to a future that will not be a repetition of her past. Her strength was not born in the moment she was loved, but in the moment she was left and still chose to love herself. Her healing is her testimony, her growth is her glory, and her silence has now become a sanctuary, not a sentence. To every woman still navigating the storm, know this: your mind is powerful, your heart is resilient, and your future is not determined by who left, but by what you're rising into. Keep walking, keep healing, because the woman you're becoming is more powerful than the woman you lost yourself trying to be.